So let's talk about marriage. Marriage.
Marriage. Let me make
Yeah,
sure the thing is doing what it's supposed to do, because I always like to verify that nowadays.
yeah. Always a good idea. No, don't want any lost episodes.
I had that with that one episode that I did of 80s Reboot, and I don't want to repeat it. All right, good. I'm all set.
Okay, great.
All right. Let me get to the right screen.
Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised it has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
Hello, this is GammaCast, and I am Dave. Online today, I have got my co-host Charlie.
Hello.
Today, we are going to be jumping into second season, episode 1. This one's called Married. It was a 2-hour season premiere. It aired September 22nd, 1978. The synopsis is David travels to Hawaii to enlist the aid of Dr. Caroline Fields, a psychiatrist who believes will be able to help him through hypnosis to control his transformations into the Hulk. When David learns that she is stricken with a terminal illness, he agrees to offer his expertise in exchange for hers. As the two work closely together, they begin to form a bond and fall in love. But will this romance be wrought with tragedy? So the alias he was using is David Benton. He's in Honolulu, Hawaii. Director was Kenneth Johnson. Writer was Kenneth Johnson. So the creator of the series, he did it all. Co-host Marriott Hartley, who actually had been nominated and won an Emmy for this episode.
Yeah, well, it was a very good episode. And casual racism aside.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of casual racism in this episode. Definitely something from the late 70s, early 80s. From the renegade Indians to the constant Chinese accent put on by David Banner. And for what it's worth, he does use an alias, but he very quickly drops it.
Right.
In this.
Right. He does. And in fact, this episode is very different than any of the previous episodes that we talked about. We have so much more that goes on in this. We had 4 Hulk outs. We had scenes where Lou Ferrigno was interacting with Bill Bixby.
Oh, yeah. That was great.
Yeah, and we had pretty much a whole episode of him trying to do something about the Hulk problem.
Yes. This is also, I think, really one of the most comic book related Hulks of the time, because when we're doing the visualizations with the Hulk, that's very much, that has become a standard trope in the Hulk comic books, where you have the sort of crossroads of the mind where the Hulk and Banner have their negotiations. And so that was very nice to see there. It was actually, it was one of these things where I felt it was so good that you almost feel a little disappointed that they didn't do more with it, that there probably could have been a little bit more they could have done as far as having the Hulk really interact with Banner, rather than it just be Banner trying, like, there's one thing that happens in it where when they first do it, and like Banner's walking away from the Hulk and the Hulk is following him.
Right.
And you don't really get anything from that, but I really thought that was like a missed opportunity there to have some great interaction between Banner and Hulk, with like, why is the Hulk following him, and what is their nature. Now, granted, that would be a big jump, and I'm saying that as a comic book fan who's very much into the psychological aspects of Banner versus the Hulk. So I do understand that that might not have been what they were going for at that time. It was really great to see here. Really great to see here.
Yeah, and I really think that, they concentrated a lot on the fact of him trying to mentally find a way to subdue the Hulk. But it would have been really cool to see him trying to interact with the Hulk. And to actually
Yes.
have a conversation, have dialogue with the Hulk. Not that the Hulk would really respond, but just maybe, some kind of dialogue where he's not necessarily yelling at the Hulk, but just like trying to ask questions and hope that he would get a response.
Well, exactly.
I think that would have been fun.
Yeah. Now, one thing I really was disappointed by in this was how little Jack McGee was a part of the story. And really I kind of felt like, because of course after the first Hulk out through the luau, where we get this unsupervised child who apparently is just it was the 80s, man. And yeah, you just let your kid run around Hawaii unsupervised, no problem.
That kid was all over the place all by himself that whole episode. I was just like,
Yeah.
why isn't somebody watching him?
Yeah, and he does have a parent, because you do see his mom pull him away from the Hulk in that first Hulk out.
Right.
But then we never see his mom again, except off screen, And then, even after he nearly drowns, he's back out by himself again. It's like, really? Maybe those parents just weren't happy with him as a child. I don't know.
He seemed like a nice kid, but it was kind of like, if I see, if I'm somewhere and then there's this big green beast running around, it's not like I'm going to go, oh, go ahead, little Johnny, go play, by the water. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was the 80s, This was back when parents just didn't care.
Right. Well, actually, 1978, but close enough.
1978. I know. Yeah. Even worse, quite frankly. This is before they even started having the satanic ritual scares of the 80s. So yeah.
Right.
Although one would think that a Hulk would be scary enough,
Yeah, you would have thought. You would have thought.
But it was bothersome to me because, of course, so McGee shows up and knocks on the doctor's house, and and of course you get that almost gets caught moment with McGee and Hulk, or McGee and Banner, where Banner opens the door and then closes it real quick when he realizes that it's Jack McGee. And then Jack McGee just walks away, and then we never see him again. And it's like, shouldn't McGee's reporter instincts have been telling him something's going on in this house? Maybe I should go around, notice all the damage to the window and the wall where the Hulk smashed through the night before. That was a little disappointing to me, because I kind of felt that didn't really ring true for the series.
Yeah, exactly. We expect a bit more out of McGee, investigative reporterness. But he did drop that little bombshell about the register wanting to pay $10,000 for information to capture the Hulk. So I thought that was an interesting little nugget of information to throw out there.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Now I don't know how true that was.
Right.
Because of course, a lot of these tabloids do give these rewards that are almost impossible to claim, but it is a delightful thing for McGee to offer. But this episode to me was really nice in a lot of ways. It was really a great episode. This is actually the first time, the strawberry parable that we get in this, which is it's a Zen. I forget the term that they use for those, but I had actually first heard the strawberry fable from on King of the Hill. So it kind of struck me as weird. Just, oh wow, okay, that's here too. Of course, the strawberry fable is the idea of the man. He's chased by a tiger. The tiger chases him off a cliff. as he falls off the cliff, he grabs onto a branch and he looks below himself and he sees another tiger waiting for him to fall. So he knows that he is going to die one way or the other. And then he sees the strawberry growing out of the side of the mountain. He reaches with his free hand for the strawberry and he eats it, and it is the sweetest strawberry he's ever eaten. And of course, this is
kind of a life lesson to enjoy the moments you have, because you never know when the end's going to come. So yeah, I got that. I got that vibe.
and it is interesting to me in this sense, and on Me TV tonight they were doing Life and Death, and we're thinking about how recently Banner was just willing to randomly inject things into his brain to try and stop the Hulk. And it just kind of struck me as interesting that as his wife, because they do get married, and he does sign the marriage certificate, David Banner. Interesting to me, because that actually comes up in a later episode again, because I was reading up some of the future episodes where he has more trouble doing that, but in this case he did sign it David Banner. So if anyone looks at the public record, they're going to see that, oh, David Banner is still alive, which again goes to my theory that David Banner has some money that he's still able to access as David Banner, because of course this is the pre-digital age, so it was fairly easy to do stuff like that, even with him being presumed dead.
But in this episode, though, he had alluded to the fact that it was really difficult to get to Hawaii. I had assumed that was because of monetary reasons.
Yes. Well, he may not be able. This is the other downside to the digital age, is that yes, he may have money that he can access, but that doesn't always mean he can access it.
Right.
Because he would actually have to physically go to the bank to access the funds.
Right.
It's not something like he can just, like nowadays, we just pop your debit card into any ATM, and this is possibly even at a time before there were a lot of national banks. Nowadays, you can go to a region and you'll have your bank in across 4 states. Back then, if you had your money in the National Bank of Detroit, you couldn't get your money out of it if you went to Ohio, which is again one of these. There's all these things about this show that, of course, as with so many things, where so much of the story ties into the limitations of the age. But and obviously it was going to be very difficult for him to get to Hawaii. Although theoretically, actually, it might have been smarter just to have the Hulk swim to Hawaii. When you think about it in the long term, this was, his wife's issues throughout this were very interesting. But what I was wondering is, like, did it strike you as weird that, because of course you knew right away that the Hulk could cure her, and you're almost waiting for him to try and do a kind of radical attempt to cure her, like just give her the Hulk blood, as it were. Obviously they weren't going to have her become a She-Hulk, and they couldn't have her survive. There's all these things about it that obviously are limitations to it. But it's a little surprising in its own way that he doesn't want to be more aggressive in his seeking a cure for her. Even when like I said, a few episodes ago, or that she's not more aggressive, when just a few episodes ago he was like willing to inject stuff into his brain to try and on the hunch it might help.
Well, I think that she was very aggressive with trying to cure herself.
Yeah, but when they know that the Hulk is a possible cure.
Right.
I kind of felt there probably should have been a little more conflict in that. I felt that maybe she should have been more insistent that she, basically that she give him that. I thought that would have been a much more interesting line of difficulty there if it had been that she wants the Hulk juice and he won't give it to her because he's afraid of the possible side effects, and she's like, the side effect of not having it is death. And again, like I said, there are these things in this episode that, as a deep comic book fan, I think that I come to it with a much heavier thought about what their potentials could have been, you know. But I do understand that from their perspective as the television writers, that they couldn't explore a lot of these ideas because it was going to write them into a corner. You know, they're not going to be able to, like I said, they can't go to have a She-Hulk on this. They can't go to have an outcome that dramatically, you know, they can't have her live and then have David Banner be married to this person, you know. It's like as soon as she's married, you know, they have to throw her into the fridge, you know. This woman is getting fridged by the end of this episode, and they fridged her. Although interestingly enough, you know, that was, I thought, an interesting thing when she jumps out of the car.
Yeah.
Because it was such a strange occurrence there. You know, that she, you know, and I was never quite sure. I mean, I guess she was hysterical, and there something about her disease was making her, I guess, maybe giving her some level of mental incoherence.
Right.
I'm guessing that's what that was about.
Well, I mean, she 2 times in the episode, I mean, she really kind of did things that was, I would guess, out of character for somebody, you know, of her stature, you know,
Yeah.
and that's the part where she had gotten the test results and just decided to go out clubbing, you know, and so you had that was just, I would assume, really out of character for her type of person. And then the other part where he's trying to get her to the hospital and jumps out of the car. So I think there are probably moments within the episode that they're trying to demonstrate that she's kind of really not of her full faculty.
Yeah. Well, I did think that the going to the swingers club, and just, I love the fact that the club is actually called Swingers.
Yeah.
1978, gotta love it. I did think that was very understandable. I can see the idea of, I have got the worst news possible. I'm going to go drink myself to death. I can get that. I can get the idea. The other time, like I said, it seemed much more like she was in, you know, almost a state of dementia when she
Right.
runs away. You know, where it's like her mind is gone, and you know, and that I think is a little heavier of I think those two scenes are separated and different in the way that they approach things, you know.
Okay. So
Yeah.
do we want to do like a brief overview of the episode, or do we just want to start picking on the Brad from the Swingers Club?
Oh, Brad, we loved him. I loved,
I could go either way with going
Yeah.
synopsis, going through it real quickly, but I
Yeah.
really gotta pick on Brad for a little bit. So
Okay. Well, it was, well, you know, I mean, they do, you know, it was very rapey. Let's just get that out of
yes,
the way.
yeah, that was just so yeah, 70s and odd. And so essentially, I guess what we're getting to is the part where she's gotten the lab results. She didn't like the results, so she went to go get herself into a drunken stupor. And as she's doing that, of course, this swinger shows up, with the gold chain, the open shirt, the nice flowing chest hair, named Brad. She decides that, okay, I'm going to go home with this guy after dancing with him. Of course, we had some disco music before that happened. And
Yeah.
then she goes back to the place, and then he's with another couple, they're with another couple with this girl that's like saying far out way too much.
Yeah, and again, just to put it clear, she was, because she asked for a double mai tai, and then
Right.
they show that she's had, like, I think 3 or 4 of them.
Right.
So she's had about, because each one's a double, it's like 6 to 8 mai tais that she's had.
Right.
You know, so she is not all there. You know, and we see that repeatedly when she's there, where she is kind of in that not quite there moment. Although it does get fun when David does show up, and we do get the Hulk out moment from that, you know.
Right. And then that's when he tries to get in past the 2 guys that we were just referring to, because he sees her up in the loft having one of her seizures. So he's trying to get to her, and of course they don't want him involved, so they grab him, throw him off the balcony, and then we get the Hulk out moment, and we actually have a moment where the Hulk picks the guy up by his chest hair. I mean, that was just hilarious.
Yes.
And then the whole time, the other woman who's there, she says "far out" again after we have a super leap into the balcony before the Hulk goes crazy, and then it eventually ends up a moment where the Hulk tries to grab one of the guys by the head, and then his whole headpiece comes off.
Yeah, his hair comes off, and you see that
Right.
and they put a very bad bald wig on him.
Oh, it was horrible.
Yeah, but they give him the little Ben Franklin hair in the back, and it was just it was not a. But I got what they were going for, rather than get a bald guy and put a nice rug on him, they got a guy with hair and then covered up with a bald cap for that one scene to make it look like he had a rug. So it was probably a cost saving effort. I guess it worked for 1978, but it was, and then really this is like the first time we really see the Hulk just completely trash a place. I think, where he really, pulls down the loft and endangers people. I think, although everyone gets out, clearly survives and everything, and then Hulk takes I'm forgetting her name and runs out.
Dr. Carolyn Feltz.
Yeah, Dr. Carolyn, yes.
But we really didn't have a heavy duty thing for the Hulk to fight this episode. So there wasn't really like a gang of bad guys or mafia guys or anything like that. So this was really kind of the only moment that we really got to showcase the destructive power of the Hulk.
And they really showcased it well. For an episode without an actual Hulk feat of strength, they used the Hulk well here. I'm sure there was probably some thoughts about having the Hulk versus the Hurricane, but that probably didn't work out when they were thinking it through. But when it comes to this idea about the underutilization of Jack McGee in this episode, again, this was like the perfect place for Jack McGee to show up the next day. This is where Jack McGee would have gone, and we could have gotten I get why they have this basic problem with the character of Jack McGee, because Jack McGee is always right behind the Hulk. But when you open up the story with Jack McGee, when you have more than one Hulk out, when you have Jack McGee on the case, it's a much harder sell. One imagines maybe what they really needed here. They needed a scene of Jack McGee being told by his supervisors back at the paper, look, we're not going to pay for you to hang out in Hawaii. Basically showing why Jack McGee was pulled, but why he doesn't show up after the initial thing. That it's like, no, Jack McGee, you got to get out, or maybe have something else. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what, but it would have been. It just seemed odd to have that one scene with McGee and then not come back to him.
And this is where we would kind of jump forward into that whole idea that we talked about on our wrap-up episode, where we would have a Jack McGee Files comic book, because this would have been a perfect segue into that, is to him following up with those guys the day after. But I could see why it wasn't necessary for this story, because they're focusing on the relationship between Caroline and David and trying to cure her. And it really, having Jack there, that near miss, that was great, but they didn't need to do more of that in this story in order to continue the drama. They already had enough drama to spare.
And again, I think what their problem is that they've got Jack Colvin, who has it in his contract, that he has to appear in the episode and all this kind of stuff. And maybe that, I guess what my take on it would have been, Here's what I would have said. If they had wanted to do that, here would have been the better scene to do with Jack Colvin. Show Jack Colvin back in California talking to his boss about, listen, the the Hulk is in Hawaii. I'm getting all these reports, the Hulk in Hawaii, but his boss not letting him go to Hawaii.
Right.
That I think would have been, even making it a bit of a comic relief scene, I think that would have been better. It would have made more sense logically, in hindsight being 2020 as it always is, although then again, they actually, because I'm sure they shot this in Hawaii on the Hawaii 5 set. So I'm sure that, when they were all saying, well, we're going to Hawaii, I'm sure Jack Colvin was like, yeah, I'm going to be in this episode. We're going to Hawaii.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
I don't care if you're writing me 2 lines and it doesn't make sense. I'm going to Hawaii and I'm going to be part of this episode. You're not leaving me back in Pittsburgh while you go to Hawaii.
Yeah, I could only imagine that there's like a script, and he's like, "Hold on, where am I at in this? You need to write me in. Here's my
Yes,
contract.
exactly.
Come on, guys."
But it is nice, and it is nice to see him there, even if he doesn't get to do much. And it is a really fun scene. Again, for comic relief, where we open the door and then we close the door. Classic physical comedy.
Yeah, and I really, I like the near misses. So, and this one was actually probably the closest near miss that we've had. The only one that I could think is comparable is like that time that David was going to get into the car, and that he knew Jack was in, but then he didn't realize that Jack was unconscious. And I think that was the Las Vegas episode. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the Las Vegas episode.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that was really the only one that was as close as, that we've gotten, for that kind of near miss. But this was like, door open, there he is, and whoop, close the door. I loved it. I want to, we had 4 Hulk outs. And the situation around them all is the first one was he was remembering the death of his wife while under hypnosis. The second one we talked about where he was beaten, thrown off a balcony into a glass table.
Mhm.
The
Yes.
third one was a dream of his current and his first wife both dying. And then the fourth one, he was hit by a car in a hurricane, then trapped in an alley by the fallen electric transformer thingy.
Yeah.
So definitely, a 4 Hulk out episode. And then we also got a lot more Lou Ferrigno with the whole situation with him trying to find the mental, capacity to hold the Hulk.
Yeah, and for my money, they didn't need as many Hulk outs since they had that. And to me, it was like, wow, I could have really seen them do more with that. It's really one of these. This was a really great episode, but I kind of feel like it's so good that it just makes you realize how much more they could have done. As with any episodic story, you always feel like, oh, they could have done such a great thing here, but then the story would have ended. It's
Right.
you can't have Gilligan get off the island. If you think of that, oh, wouldn't it have been great if they had done that in that scene? It's like, yeah, but then they'd be off the island, and then this series ends. It's like, okay, it would have been nice to have had. And this is, I think, in our modern approach to episodic storytelling, this would not be the end. It's like they'd have done something with Carolyn so that Carolyn could come back in another episode. They'd have done something where what we think is the end is not the end, but that's not what they're doing here, and so that's life.
Yeah, you're right. If there would have been something where she would have, as they were in the middle of that storm, she was going to die, she jumps out of the car, and somehow she just disappears, and we have no idea what happened to her. And then end the episode there, and then that would have left the possibility, just all kinds of possibilities of future stories.
Yeah, or like you have, like I say, I mean, the She-Hulk issue with this is always, an issue. It's like, that they could have really explored this extra character. They didn't, for numerous reasons. They were eventually, they did have works that was actually going to be, I think, the last Hulk episode, which was the death of the Hulk in the TV movies, was that they were actually going to introduce. They did like some screen tests with Bridget Nielsen as the She-Hulk, and they were going to have Jen Walters and the She-Hulk be a part of the storyline, but then it wound up not being the case. And unfortunately, I will say, I think that would have been a really interesting way to approach the character. But you have to take it as it's given.
Right.
And for what it's worth, I do think that they've done a pretty. I mean, this was a really good episode, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm down on the episode, because I'm not. I really enjoyed this episode immensely.
I would say that it's definitely been one of the strongest episodes we've seen. I just really love the idea that he was getting back into his roots, being able to help with her genetic disease. Which it sounds like that was work that he was doing previous before he started, getting involved in the, trying to tap into the hidden strength, of people. So, this is work that he was doing in the past that she had acknowledged that this was something that he was well known for in the scientific community. And I thought that was a fabulous thing to see, and see him kind of get back into that kind of thing, because he's obviously David Banner is a guy that just wants to help. Even though we've picked on him in previous episodes where he sticks his nose where he shouldn't be, but obviously he's just a guy that really just wants to help, and that's what shows here, because he's like, all right, I'm going to set my problems aside, I'm going to help you, because you obviously need more help than I do right now, and hopefully we can help each other. If I can help you, then you can help me. And I see that's where his mind was going, and he would have helped anyway, I think.
Well, yeah. Well, and what she said was that basically, that this was his field, was this, genetic disorders prior to his wife's death, and that's when he sort of got obsessed with this idea of the hidden strength. Got into his own Ahab's quest, which resulted in the Hulk. And I think that it was, in its own way, very therapeutic for him here to get back to what his original research was, get back to what he originally wanted to do with his life. And I think that's where he finds himself, where he wants to marry this woman, even though he knows they don't have much time, because, that's the thing. It's like he's trying to work on a cure, but he knows that he will not. Even if he found a cure, it's unlikely that it's going to be something he can give her,
Right.
And, there is this, that I think that's the real tragedy of the whole scene, and the whole idea is that they both know, because they're both scientists, and again, like I said, I give him the flack about how he was willing to inject random things into his brain a couple episodes ago, but here they're being much more cautious, and of course they're being much more cautious because they
have that scientific mindset.
Yeah, they know the risks, and they also know they don't want to risk making it worse,
right.
And I did think it was unfortunate that they did have what could have been a cure kind of figured out just before the hurricane hits, just before she's about to die. And it's kind of, it's one of these things where, again, they kind of write themselves into that corner because, of course, well, if he has a possible cure, but not, shouldn't he give that to let someone know about this science, as a scientist, so that other people don't suffer? But at the same time, how does he do that? And it's, it is, you really get the weight of the difficulties that David Banner is going through here. And I think in this episode, just the difficulties that he has being David Banner when he can't be a scientist, when he can't be human, and he gets that moment to really be human again in this episode. And then, of course, he loses it, which is pretty sad.
I think I really felt for him when we were talking about the earthquake episode, because, he had that moment where he was just close to being able to do something, but I think it was like 3 seconds left of the timer, then he gets stopped. And in this case, this was more of the emotional ride. This guy never gets never gets a break. He just does not. And he may be happy for a short period of time when he gets to go hanging out with a trucker, or in this case, get married. I'm always going to go back to the trucker episode.
It was a great episode.
But I mean, he gets those brief moments, but then the drama, the drama that is this, the Hulk, and the TV series, has to happen. I guess if it was going to be, if he's just going to be able to lay down stakes and live a perfectly acceptable life and not have these kind of challenges that keep coming his way, then who would watch?
Well, exactly. But it is at the same time, he's going to go and grab his strawberries, and that's the good. That's the good. That's the good note about this, is that yes, he has gotten to this point where he realizes, and I think that maybe is even the point of this episode, maybe even the theme going forward, is that he's not going to worry as much because he knows he's on borrowed time. It's an interesting thing when we get into the next episode, because I did start watching it, the Antok horror, and it is an interesting aspect of it that it does open with, as we've seen recently, the idea of it opens with Jack McGee already there. And unlike other episodes, though, when we see David Banner, even though the Hulk has already showed up, even though Jack McGee's already looking for him, he's just sitting he's at his day job. He's not trying to run. He's not trying to get out of town, because you know what? He's just going to let it happen. I haven't seen the whole episode yet, but I get the feeling I just saw like the first 5 minutes of it, but I get the feeling that's where we're going with this, that this is going to be the evolution of David Banner in this storyline, is going to be that, he's not going to be sitting there every day worried about, Jack McGee or the Hulk or anybody else. He's going to live his life. He's going to eat what strawberries he can find, and he's going to enjoy them because he knows that they will be the sweetest strawberries he ever eats.
Yeah, and that's really cool, because he's picking up the lessons that he's learning as he's going through this, through the series. Yeah, and as we talked about the evolution of him in the first season, where he had kind of lost his naivety, where he's not fooled so much, and he's a little, and the road has made him a bit tougher. Maybe that's what season 2 is going to be. The thread that's going to be there is where he's going to be a bit more casual, or accepting of this is just my life now, and what happens.
Exactly. And I think that's a good evolution for the character,
Right.
I think it makes a lot of sense in character, and I think it makes for a better show.
What we're going to see as we progress through this.
Exactly. Hopefully, anyway.
So do you have any final thoughts on this episode, or did you already cover that with your strawberry synopsis?
Well, I think the strawberry synopsis is I think that is very much the thrust of the episode. I mean, I think this was probably, this was as strong of an episode as they could have started with. And I think that, I hope it's not the high point of the season.
I'll agree with you on that one.
But it was really, it could easily wind up being that, not for a lack of skill on the ensuing episodes, but this was just a really good episode.
It was. What I wanted to end with was the little boy who gives that little bit of wisdom at the end, where he says, "My grandma always says people never die so long as someone remembers them." And then you get that little bit of a smile from David. And that was just a very, very poignant way of ending the episode, based on everything that David went through, over the course of the episode. So and then that's when you get the Lonely Man theme, of course.
Yeah. The Lonely Man.
So, Charlie, what are your social media credentials?
Well, if you happen to like The Incredible Hulk and you are watching The Incredible Hulk on MeTV or on Netflix at 7 o'clock and want to tweet along with me as I do so as well on Saturdays, although not this Saturday because we were doing podcasts this Saturday, but on most Saturdays, I will be live tweeting The Incredible Hulk at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. And of course, you can always write to me about the Hulk, about anything Hulk or comic book or television from the 80s related at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog@gmail.com.
All right, and I am Dave, and so you can find me on Twitter at 80s Reboot. We have a Tumblr, that's 80sreboot.tumblr.com. Email is 80sreboot@gmail.com. We've also got a Facebook page, so that's facebook.com/80sreboot. And if you get a chance, check out our blog at southgatemediagroup.com/80srebootblog. And then, of course, we could always use a rating and review in iTunes, so please do that for us, and we'd really appreciate it. So we appreciate everybody hulking out with us tonight, and it was a pleasure as always, Charlie.
Always a pleasure.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.